Hey everybody, it's Magic Prepper and I'm here with MidwayUSA, and I wanted to go over what I consider to be my do-all rifle concept, my go-to rifle if things were to get really bad all of a sudden. And the idea behind a rifle setup like this one is that I could grab it out of my safe in any emergency scenario without knowing what the threat is or knowing what the risk environment might look like, and it's still going to do a good job of covering just about all of my bases, regardless of where I'm located. Rural, urban, it doesn't really matter. This rifle could provide you with whatever you might need in most applications. So that was the goal here, and I figured I'd talk about the base rifle itself, all of the accessories when it comes to optics and lights and everything else, and give you some ideas about what I could actually attach to this in a quick detach method in order to make it a little bit more effective. So just in case you like the level of content that comes out here on the MidwayUSA channel, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below because there's new stuff coming out all the time from other great creators as well, such as 9-hole reviews. So make sure you check that out. This rifle in particular is a BCM RECCE 16. Now you can accomplish this similar setup with a much more affordable base rifle. However, the BCM RECCE 16 is very high quality. It's been a very accurate rifle. And this is actually the RECCE 16 lightweight, which means it has a lightweight profile barrel, which keeps the entire package a little bit lighter, which is very well appreciated if you're ever out rucking about with it. Now, the 16-inch barrel is something that I actually like, and I'll give you a couple reasons as to why. First off, well, you don't have to deal with any NFA stuff or have to use a pistol brace because you meet the minimum requirements of barrel length to avoid any of those hassles. So that's always good. But a 16-inch barrel is also extremely effective using the cartridge that I would suggest for this particular purpose, which is 5.56 NATO. 5.56 NATO is a very velocity dependent cartridge, and that 16-inch barrel can actually still give you effective terminal ballistics with that cartridge without having to sacrifice anything in the process. So it's about as short as you can go while still having long-range capabilities and avoiding a lot of other problems. So we're just going to use a 16-inch for this example because I actually think it's still a very effective barrel length. The other thing I like about the BCM is that it's very simple. It's very bare bones in many ways. There's not a lot of things about this particular rifle that are fancy per se, but it has everything you need and nothing you don't. So for example, it has the BCM PNT trigger, which is a single stage mil-spec style trigger, but it's their polished nickel Teflon. So an upgrade from your standard mil-spec trigger and a noticeable one, which I like quite a bit, and I haven't really felt the need to replace it. It doesn't have an ambidextrous safety, and if that's something important to you, you could always install one, of course, but I haven't found the need for that as a right-handed shooter very much, to be honest. And this, of course, has the M-LOK handguard, which at this point in time is the right way to go. Key mod has seen its days, and I don't believe you should be picking up anything key mod at this point in time unless you're getting a great deal on something that's a little bit older. The stock, the furniture, and everything else that comes on the BCM RECCE 16 is good to go as well. Nothing requires being changed out. Of course, personal preference might decide that you want to do that, but at the end of the day, this furniture works exactly as intended. So we have a good base rifle chambered in 5.56 NATO, something that's reliable. And if you have to buy something more budget friendly, which is totally understandable, just make sure that you vet it and ensure that it meets the standards that you have set for it, okay? Moving on from the rifle, we have a capable rifle in a abundant and logistics positive cartridge in 5.56 NATO, right? And we have that 16-inch barrel, which actually can push it out a little bit further. And we don't know what the threat environment's going to be, and we don't know what it is that we might face in the sense of challenges. So we have to choose an optic that's going to give us a little bit of versatility. Now, I have nothing against if you were to just throw a red dot on a rifle like this and say it's good to go, because in many circumstances and many environments, especially urban, that would be a good option. It's very simple, there's not a lot of thought process involved, and they're relatively robust. So in my opinion, not a bad way to go. However, if I'm unsure whether or not I might face targets at longer ranges, or if I might have issues with positive identification, aka we aren't sure who is being problematic and maybe we have to ensure we're looking at the right target before we engage, an LPVO does a great job of providing me with that capability. And this one in particular, I can't recommend enough. This is the Primary Arms PLXC 128 first focal plane with their, I believe it's the ACSS Raptor reticle. And this one is the yards reticle, which is the BDC, that's calibrated for 5.56 NATO or 308. So, why do I like this LPVO? First off, it's extremely lightweight, because that's a real word, and the last one wasn't. How lightweight is it? 17 ounces. That's really light for an optic that can go up to 8x magnification. Not to mention it even has illumination, which is secondary in my opinion for features I care about in an LPVO, but it does provide you with that. It's very clear glass. The reticle is extremely beneficial in the sense of getting on target quickly when you're at range or you're using wind holds. And it's just been robust and easy to use. Eye relief's good. Everything's good about this optic. It really is hard to beat in its price range. And yes, this is around that mid-tier of $1,400-1,500, right? That's not cheap by any means. But if you want to get a first focal plane optic that can get up to 8x magnification and you want it to provide you with, let's just say, some quality of life when it comes to being behind the glass, this is pretty much the best value for your dollar, even though it costs that much. Because comparing this to something like a Nightforce NX8, which is much more expensive, you're really not getting much more for your money for that NX8. And in fact, this still might be a better optic. So Primary Arms PLXC 1-8X, excellent choice. Now, if you were going to be on a budget and you want to set up a rifle similar to this one, but you don't want to spend $1,400 or $1,500 on an optic, which is completely understandable because that's how much this rifle cost, right? Then I suggest looking at the 1 to 6x range in the second focal plane. And the reason I say that is because at those lower price points, that's a much less complicated system that is more forgiving when it comes to glass clarity, eye relief, and everything else related to what goes into an expensive optic. So a 1 to 6x like a SIG Tango MSR, second focal plane, or even the Primary Arms ACSS Nova fiber wire reticled 1 to 6x, their SLX model, very good options. Both of those are within the $300 or $400 price range. Even the Vortex Venom, the new 1 to 6x they just put out, I would look at that as well. Those are all great options that are all budget friendly and still accomplish the same goal of having some magnification on the rifle while maintaining a solid 1x performance, which is important to a degree. But in my situation, it's not as important. Why is that? Well, first off, the mount we're using here is the Primary Arms PLX mount, which is actually made in the USA. A very good mount. Very solid, very rigid, and it's made in the USA, so can't complain too much. And they also offer a 30mm top ring cap for it, which you can see right here. And that provides me with the ability to mount an optic with the RMR footprint above this LPVO in the 12 o'clock piggyback position. Now, what does that provide me with? Well, first off, it's a secondary aiming solution. So if my main optic goes down, I have a secondary backup optic to use. It also gives me faster target acquisition at close ranges because it's a red dot sight. So it's quick. You just put the red dot on target, you pull the trigger. I have this one 0 to 50 yards, and it works quite well for that. But it also allows me to use night vision passively. So I can aim passively using a night vision device without having to send out any IR or photons for somebody else to identify. So because of that, the 1X on my LPVO maybe isn't quite as important, but I still prefer it to be good, right? But then by adding the red dot, I have a secondary option that allows me to go fast if I need to, right? So this optic setup as an entire package is excellent. Now, what I will say is that in order to maximize the effectiveness of this rifle and to get the most out of this optic, I am running 77 grain Sierra Match Kings or OTMs, right? And in fact, these are in particular the IMI 77 Razor cores, which 77 grain 5.56 NATO, that's made to be more accurate at longer range and still very effective on target. And in fact, 77 grain is much better out of shorter barrels than your typical 55 or 62 grain loadings. Why am I using this ammo? Because it's going to give me the best chance of accomplishing whatever the goal I have is. And for this particular optic, the Primary Arms PLXC 1-8X, if you zero this at 50 yards with 77 grain OTM 5.56 NATO ammo, then the BDC reticle built into the optic lines up just about perfectly. So you don't have to think too hard when you're using this reticle because everything's already mapped out for you. Your 4 mark is at 400 yards. Your 6 mark is at 600 yards. Very easy, very intuitive, and this ammunition can actually make those distances consistently. So that's why I'm using that type of ammunition. It complements the optics package as well as enhances the capability of the rifle system as a whole, which is another reason why this could be considered more of a do-all system, because it can push the boundaries of what 5.56 NATO was originally considered to be capable of. Moving on from there, a very important part of any rifle used in an emergency scenario is going to be your ability to maintain it, aka keep it, right? You don't want it to fall off your body or to be misplaced or taken from you. So you need a sling. So the BCM stock here has a QD sling point right here, and I have my sling attached to it. And then I also, on the other side here, can show you, I have another sling attachment point right here. This is using the BCM D-ring style QD sling swivels. I like them because they kind of tighten up on the sling a little bit more, especially with these thinner slings. Some of them are a little bit thicker and you might not be able to get away with using these. But this sling in particular is actually a flat line. Nobody likes flat line. Flat line Fiberco sling, which I actually like a lot. I've enjoyed it quite a bit. And one thing I like about it is that it has this padded section right here, which is very minimalist. It's not very thick. It's not obnoxiously big or poofy or anything like that, but it adds just enough padding to make the rifle comfortable to carry for long periods of time, which I find important. Some of those very thin slings that are just a strip of nylon over time will wear into your shoulder or wear into your neck, and it just becomes a lot more uncomfortable. So get a sling that's going to give you a little bit of extra padding. Other options that I would consider that are very good for this role would be Blue Force Gear. They make excellent slings. I have them on multiple rifles. And I also like the standard Magpul slings. Yeah, they're not maybe as high speed as some of the other stuff on the market right now, but they're thick enough and the webbing itself is thick enough in order to create a level of comfort while being an effective sling that's very durable and will definitely get the job done. So check those out as well, but these flatline Fiberco slings are actually very impressive. So we've got a way to keep the rifle on our body, very important. And then of course, the next most important thing is being able to see your target, which the optics help with, but only if it's daytime. So what if it's dark and you need to see what you're looking at? You need to have a light of some kind. Now listen, you don't have to use the light. In fact, you need to judiciously use the light. You do not want to spray a bunch of white light downrange without knowing what might be down there. So these are meant to be used very much with intent. You don't want to just be willy-nilly shining lights all over the place, right? However, if you need a light to positively identify a threat, then you need a light. And of course, a Surefire is hard to beat. Now, what's interesting about this setup is that this is actually a Surefire lamp head, the KM1E, on an Arisaka Surefire 300 Scout body with a Surefire tail switch. That saved me a little bit of money. You can actually build these lights out for a little bit cheaper than buying them complete if you use certain parts like Arisaka because, well, they make good quality components that are universally accepted with some of these other light systems like Surefire, while being a little less expensive. So that's the route I took for this particular setup. So the tail cap switch, I like it because it's reliable. It'll work when I need it to, and there's no pressure switch to worry about cables getting snagged on something or failing me at the worst time possible. And for a preparedness related rifle and something that's made for who knows what you might run into, I don't like having any additional components that could fail on me. So this is actually what I prefer now, and I'll start moving towards this more frequently on other rifles that I own, unless I'm restricted by the size of the rifle or the layout, and then a pressure switch might be necessary. But in this situation, trying to keep things lightweight and minimalist, this works perfectly for me. And the 300 series of Surefire lights, way less than the 600 because they only use one battery instead of two, and that matters when you get towards the end of your rifle and weight starts to becoming a little bit more noticeable, right? So this is how I have this set up, and the KM1E light itself is a vampire light. And what that means is that it's capable of IR as well as white light. Now I like that because in this situation you can see, you can actually turn off the light. You can go to off, IR, back to off, or white. So if I don't need the light, I can just put it in off mode, and that stops me from accidentally activating it in a situation where I don't need it. But I can also switch it back to white and be good to go, or IR, which I was just on IR actually. What's that do for me? Why do I want an IR light? Well, I have night vision. Not everyone does, so that might not be important to you. But if you do have night vision, but you don't want to worry about having a big clunky laser aiming module, or you don't want to spend the money on it because they're generally expensive, right now I have the ability to passively aim through this red dot optic using night vision, and then I can use this flashlight set to IR mode to illuminate the area a little bit further. Now it's more of a flood illumination than it is like a spotlight. It doesn't really have a focused beam, but it does provide additional light that helps enhance your ability to see while under nods. So this rifle doesn't have a laser designator or anything like that, but I can still engage a target with night vision or under night vision with this red dot and with this light pretty effectively. And because that's more of a secondary concern for me when it comes to a do-all, who knows what's going to happen type rifle, I find that to be completely acceptable, especially from a civilian standpoint. So that explains the light. And just so you know, the light is using an Arasaka mount as well. As you can see here, it's an inline mount, and I'm using that 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock position there on the, or 10, let's call it 10:30, right? On the rail here from the BCM in order to accommodate that. Everything fits together really nicely on this rifle. So this is what I have set up for a do-all rifle. There's a couple other things that we can add on, which I generally do, but I don't find them to be requirements, but they do help with quality of life. What do I mean by that? Quick detach is your best friend. Why is that? Because when you can quick detach something, it allows you to remove the weight when it's not necessary. And then if you decide you need it, you add it on and then remove it again once it's no longer necessary. And that's very important when it comes to a rifle. You want it to be lightweight and well balanced. And some of these accessories are really bad about ruining that. So what do I mean? Well, give me 1 second here. We have to do things a certain way in order to appease the YouTube overlords. But I believe they're appeased now. And as you can see, I have a suppressor on the rifle. So in order to accommodate the suppressor in a QD or quick detach method, I use the ASR flash hider from Silencer Co. And then this is actually a Huxworks Ventum 762 suppressor, which is a low back pressure flow through can that allows you to not have to change your gas system too much in order to accommodate a suppressor, which is really nice. And it's a lot easier on the internal parts to prevent additional wear or anything along those lines. But what's cool about the Ventum from Huxworks is that it uses the universal hub system. So I was able to attach a Silencer Co. quick detach device here in order to quickly attach it to my muzzle device, even though this is not a Silencer Co. suppressor. So a suppressor is really important in many ways. It lowers your signature, it keeps people from being able to easily identify where you are or where shots might be coming from, or it also eliminates flash, especially at night. That's going to be a big deal. Like I said, if we're using night vision or something along those lines, it provides a lot of additional benefits. It even makes shooting more pleasant, not to mention what it does in the sense of protecting your hearing. So there's a lot of reasons why a suppressor could be very important regarding this particular scenario we're discussing, which is an emergency, an unknown scenario that we're not really sure what the problem is, right? So having access to a suppressor is good. However, I don't find it necessary. If you don't have a suppressor or you're not interested in dealing with the paperwork and everything else involved in that, totally understandable. Definitely not a requirement, but something that I like to have and I prefer. And quick detach is where it's at for that, because that's another, what is that? 14 ounces strapped to the end of my barrel. Not necessarily my favorite thing to have to do. The other consideration here is that as soon as I add the suppressor, this is something that you should be aware of, especially if you're new to suppressors or anything along those lines. This optic right now is actually zeroed for running suppressed. If I take that suppressor off right now, and because of the lightweight profile of this barrel and the amount of weight that I just added to the end of it, I have to adjust my elevation by 1 full mil. It just so happened to work out that it's 1 full mil, which I appreciate because it's easy for me to remember. I don't think that works on every optic the same way or with every suppressor and barrel combination, but for this particular rifle, I have to dial down 1 full mil or actually dial up 1 full mil once I remove the suppressor. Because all of a sudden all that weight's gone off the end of the barrel, and now the barrel's no longer angling downward. So it does change your zero. And that's something that you have to be aware of if you're going to be switching between suppressed and unsuppressed. And I just wanted to make sure you're aware of that because it's an issue that I've personally run into. And I just know that if I take that off, I go up 1 mil and we're good to go. Another quick detach accessory that I think is worth considering and could be very valuable during an emergency where you have this type of rifle, which is more than capable of reaching out to 500 or 600 yards, but may need some additional assistance to make sure to accurately hit a target at that range. And that additional assistance would be a bipod. So right here on the bottom, I've got a section of M-lock to Picatinny rail from Magpul. And what that allows me to do is take my Harris bipod here, which I believe is the SBM 9 to 13. I like 9 to 13 better than 6 to 9. 6 to 9 for me, with my body type and posture, just doesn't provide me with enough clearance. So 9 is what I'm always at on a 6 to 9 bipod anyway. So what this allows me to do is be at 9 to begin with and get up higher if need be. So I prefer a 9 to 13. Harris bipods are excellent. They're really still the gold standard when it comes to bipods. Of course, you can get nicer ones, but they're going to cost you a lot. And these bipods are still in that $100 to $200 range, right? And this one's an M-lock Harris bipod. And what's nice about this is I've attached a American Defense Manufacturing, or an ADM, quick detach mount to that. And what it does is, you can see here, it actually accepts the M-lock inside of the mount and turns it into a QD that attaches to Picatinny. So we can actually throw that on here now. Oh, well, not if I'm going to be an idiot, but a normal person could throw that on here now, and now you have a bipod. So if you were to be in a static position, or you had targets that were further out that you needed to make sure you could actually hit properly at distance, this allows you to get a lot more stability and a lot more consistency at range. And then of course this additional weight, which I believe this bipod with the QD mount, it's going to put you, I can't remember the exact number, but it's around 11 or 12 ounces. That's a lot of extra weight on the end of the handguard. Not to mention we also have a suppressor on now. There's a lot more weight suddenly, which is thrown off the balance, which is why I want those items to be quick detach, so I can adjust that as needed and get rid of that extra weight if it's not needed, right? But a lot of extra capability and something that might be worth having, which you can throw in a backpack or whatever else you want to do. So this, to me, is the do-all rifle. Is it going to be as effective as a 6.5 Creedmoor or a 308 at long range? No. Is it going to be as effective as a Mark 18 with a 10.3-inch barrel at CQB and room clearing? No. But we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know why we're grabbing this rifle out of our safe, possibly. We don't know what threats we might encounter. We might have to go into a building and might be saying, man, I wish I grabbed that Mark 18. But once you leave that building, maybe you're out in the prairie, like where I live here in North Dakota, and you say, hey, there's someone over there at 900 yards. These are things that we're just not sure about. So if we want to have a rifle that can cover those bases without having to hyper focus on any individual task, this is what I came up with. So hopefully this gave you some things to consider when it comes to setting up a rifle for general preparedness purposes. You could call this a GPR, general purpose rifle. You could call this the do-all rifle, but it also could just be considered the rifle or the rifleman's rifle, because it's just going to do what a rifle was meant to do. Nothing in particular, nothing overly niche, but everything could be taken care of to some degree with this particular setup, and that's why I like it. Anything you would want to add to it, or that you don't think is necessary, leave it in the comments below. These discussions are good and healthy for everybody involved, and people just enjoy discussing these things because you might have ideas that I haven't thought about, and vice versa. So that's good for us to have this discourse or this discussion in order to see if there's better options out there that we might not be aware of. And of course, one thing I already know people are going to criticize is my lack of backup iron sights. I'm not opposed to backup iron sights on this system. In fact, I would generally suggest them. I just haven't gotten the ones I wanted yet for this particular rifle, and I haven't decided if I want to put inline backup iron sights, which would require me to use tools to remove this optic system because of the way the mount works, or if I should just go ahead and throw 45-degree offset sights on this particular rifle so I don't have to worry about that part of the problem. Let me know the answer to that in the comments as well, and I'll definitely consider it as I move forward and finish up this project. If you ever want to get into prepping or preparedness in general more, check out my channel, Magic Prepper. Obviously, I'm here with MidwayUSA to try to provide you with some excellent information where I can. However, it's up to you to decide if it's actually excellent information. Thanks for having me, and hopefully we can do this again soon.